That's right. You were listening to the Andrew Gossett Show on WYAB 103.9 FM. You're probably wondering who you're listening to. It's not Andy. It's Blake. So this is a special episode of the Andrew Gossett Show, and we have a special guest in the house today. This is State Auditor Shad White. Doing all right today?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me.
Of course,
I'm
absolutely.
feeling better now that that football game was over last night. I could have been in a really bad mood this morning, but
Yeah,
good right now.
doing good. So we are streaming on Rumble, we are streaming on X, and we are streaming on YouTube. 50,000 watts. That's what we got up to here at WYAB. And if you can't hear the stream, you can go to WYAB.com. First episode of 2026 as well, right, Andrew? That's awesome. All right, so a little Bible verse to get us started for the year, Romans 12:8. If it is to encourage, then give encouragement. If it is to give, then to give generously. If it is to lead, do it diligently. And if it is to show mercy, do it cheerfully. And I think that just is a good way to start off the year, because one of the problems I find in school, because a lot of you know I'm 17, y'all have listened to the show for a while, is kids don't know what they want to do. And I think that remove all of the distraction from your life and the material things and really focus on what does God have planned for you. That's where you're going to find fulfillment in your life, and you won't be stuck in the normal cycle of a 9 to 5, yada, yada, yada. That is what I think people need to learn, and I think you can do that in your life every single day. All right, let's get into it. A lot of you know, big story going around the country right now is the fraud in Minnesota. Mr. Auditor, what are your thoughts on that?
It's been really sad to see what's going on in Minnesota. I hate to say this in this way, but it's not surprising to me because really back in 2022, somewhere in there, we started to see signs that this Somali fraud was happening in Minnesota. There was a program, Feeding Our Future, which had been defrauded by hundreds of millions of dollars. And I started talking about it back then. There were a few federal indictments back then, and I actually testified before Congress in 2023 and mentioned to them that these kinds of programs really all across the country are super vulnerable to fraud, and really all that needs to happen is for a few people to get together and decide that they want to steal a whole bunch of money from the taxpayers. And so the federal government needs to do something about this. And of course, when I testified before Congress back then, the politicians in DC did absolutely nothing. I mean, you may remember, Blake, this was during the height of the Biden administration, when we would try to get meetings with the Biden HHS to talk about this kind of stuff that was going on. They wouldn't even take meetings to talk about it. It was just absolutely insane. And so now you fast forward, President Trump is in office. And I think when you have somebody like President Trump in office, you have somebody who doesn't care if they're being called names. They're just sick of what's happening to taxpayers, and they're willing to use their administration to shine a light on this kind of thing. And so now that the big spotlight gets put on Minnesota, we see exactly how bad it is, billions and billions of dollars of fraud. And so I'm grateful, I guess, now that we have a president who is going to use his administration to step up and do something. I hate that it happened. But we need to learn lessons from this. Around the country, everybody needs to learn the lesson that this can happen anywhere, and we got to be vigilant on behalf of taxpayers.
I know you do a lot of this work here in the state as well. Nothing, thankfully, as big as $9 billion.
That's right.
And I think it's going to grow the more and more that they dig into it. And we'll talk about later in the show where that money goes. Not only back home to Somalia and foreign terrorism, but also potentially Democratic candidates that run for office.
Yeah.
Do you think that there is anything on that scale, whether it's federal dollars or state dollars, that happens in the state, not only at like daycares, or it could be like gas stations or other businesses as well?
Yeah. Well, each individual program has its own weaknesses. And so you have to take each one by one. So if you look at example, daycares in Mississippi as compared to the daycare system in Minnesota, I mean, to be honest with you, when I read the stories in Minnesota, it's almost like no one cared if the daycares were lying about how many students they had and whether they were serving students well, any of that kind of stuff. Thankfully, in Mississippi, the audit process around our daycares is actually a good bit stronger than that. So you can actually go online right now and you can pull up a full list of every daycare in Mississippi that accepts public dollars, taxpayer dollars, and then you could see their most recent inspection. And the inspections look at everything from, the quality of the food that they're serving, all the way to how many kids do they say they can serve and how many kids are showing up. So you do have you have a much better process for checking these daycares in Mississippi than you did in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean that every program in Mississippi is great and has strong safeguards? Absolutely not. So an example in Mississippi that we found a few months ago is huge grants going from our Department of Health to nonprofits for absolutely no clear reason that benefited taxpayers. We saw grants going to nonprofits, and the nonprofits were then, you may have seen this audit from my office. One nonprofit was did a queer quinceañera, and so they're paying for a party. They're paying for Bud Light, literally Bud Light receipts with taxpayer dollars. So that's an example of the kind of thing that can happen in a different program, but here in Mississippi.
Yeah. I guess my question to you would be, what can the state legislature do, and and then federally, if you have any inclination there, what can they do to help prevent more stuff like this? Because that's what people want to know.
Yeah, I think that what you're seeing the Trump administration do now is what the federal government should have been doing for years. So HHS, federal agency, said just a few days ago that they were going to start requiring every single state to show more documentation before those states would be eligible to get any kind of child care subsidies. So receipts, photographs of rolls of students, all of that kind of stuff. That's what the federal government should be doing and should have been doing for the last 5 years. What can the state do? Well, I think that the state made a big mistake. And when I say the state, I mean some of our politicians made a big mistake. A few years ago, my office found a massive amount of welfare money had been misspent. Some of it had been stolen. 7 people have pleaded guilty to state or federal charges in that case. And really, the biggest response from our politicians in Jackson was to just increase the amount of welfare money that goes out per check to people who are on welfare.
Yeah.
That seemed to me to be the wrong answer to that. If you'd made me king for a day, I would not have done that. What I would have done is said, all right, we need to overhaul these programs. We need to stop paying people for not working. It hurts our economy. It hurts our labor force participation. What we need to do is instead, if we're going to get this money from the federal government, we should really only be giving it to people if they're going to show up and work at a job.
Yeah.
That's really the common sense answer. So that's the kind of stuff that I think the state needs to be doing now.
Absolutely. Hopefully we get some of that crackdown here in the session that starts in, guess what, Tuesday they swear?
Right.
Yeah, I'll be at the Capitol on Tuesday for Don Hartness over there. So that'll be awesome. I think that is very true. It's amazing to me that people just want to keep doing these handouts and stuff.
Yep.
Because the more and more that you print that money, the more and more inflation goes up, but people are not working. So people aren't stimulating the economy.
Well, you understand the economy better than most 30 and 40-year-olds because folks just sort of look at the prices at the grocery store and they're like, gosh, how did this happen? Well, it's because we've been printing money.
Yeah.
Ad nauseum for the last 5-10 years. And our federal government spends too much money.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons we spend so much money is that a big chunk of it gets taken by fraud, waste, and abuse. And so I was actually in DC. This was maybe 5-6 months ago. And I got to hear the deputy chief of staff for the president, James Blair, speak. And he was saying, we think that our crackdown on fraud, waste, and abuse in the federal government, especially in these big entitlement programs, will potentially save $1 trillion a year. And if you do that, I mean, that's how you crack down on not just fraud, waste, and abuse, but also the inflation that we see happening in our economy and our debt. Absolutely.
And I think that's what the goal of Doge was to get $2 trillion or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But we spend 5 and we take in 5, we spend 7 every year.
Yeah.
That's what the federal government's doing right now. Anyone that can do basic addition knows that's not going to work. Doesn't work. So if you get $1 trillion in entitlement programs, and then the combination of tariffs, the gold card, and then even more that you find, you really start making stuff happen and on making progress on that debt.
I think so too. And you pointed it out. Doge was the first piece in cracking down on that debt. But the other really big important piece that the president has is the One Big Beautiful Bill.
Mm-hmm.
So those two things together are very critical to cracking down on the debt because the One Big Beautiful Bill, that's the thing that has the big fraud prevention mechanisms in it for these big entitlement programs. You have to have both.
Absolutely. And I think it mandated, I remember Stephen Miller talking about this whenever it was a big controversy, is it mandates $2 trillion in savings over the next 10 years. And that's it's not enough, but it's a start. And
It's
because
more than any administration in
oh
my lifetime
yeah,
has done. Right?
absolutely, certainly in mine. So I think it'll be great, and that's what people have been talking about. So, like, well, Thomas Massey didn't vote for this bill because this is the same funding that goes. No, this is the bill that cuts out the fraud.
That's right.
Because the bill won't take effect until now, until this year, 2025 and before. This bill had nothing to do with it.
That's right. And also, for those folks who didn't vote for this bill, my Lord, when was the last time you saw a perfect piece of legislation? Like,
never.
It's never happened because we're humans.
Yeah.
There's only been one perfect person to walk on this earth, right?
Absolutely.
So, you have to figure out, all right, is this legislation on net good for the taxpayers? And obviously the one big beautiful bill was very critical.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad it passed. I hate that we had to fight some Republicans to get it done.
Yeah,
but
I mean, it is what it is, but we will certainly see as it closer and closer that we get to the midterms, it'll start to take effect. We've already seen interest rates get dropped, and then they get the corporate tax cut as well, which they don't put that in their pocket. Anyone that takes high school economics know that they will put that back into the market because their competitors are going to put it into the market. That's the whole point of it. Supply side economic works. We see that every single day. And did you watch any of Mondami's speech yesterday in New York?
I stomached through some Twitter clips. I did not sit down and watch the whole thing.
Pretty bad. He said that I was elected as a democratic socialist and I will govern like a democratic socialist.
Credit to him for being honest, right? Like, you see a lot of Democrats who just lie and pretend to be centrists, and this guy is being honest.
Yeah, I will credit him for that, and he knows how to run a campaign, at least on social media. But God bless that city for what they're about to endure.
It's really sad. It's been a while since I've been to New York for a visit. I don't plan on going back anytime soon, but it's sad because it's a huge American city. I think the president has even said, this is a city that needs to be great.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be under Mamdani.
How often do you see Democrat politicians talk about how the whole country needs to be great?
Yeah, exactly.
The specific parts that they govern.
What they say is, oh, we're not a great country, and like, if you don't think we're a great country, then there are other places to go.
Absolutely.
There are plane tickets. There are
you
folks
get paid $1,000 by ICE to go back to your home country.
That's right. That's exactly right. What worried me about the Mamdani speech, one of the clips that I saw was, he said the age of rugged individualism is over.
Yeah.
And we're embracing collectivism. And just breaking apart the last part of that sentence, like, I don't think that folks realize collectivism and collectivist governments have collectively been responsible for millions and millions of deaths.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think it was like some sort of paradise to go live in Cambodia under Pol Pot or go live in Soviet Russia, like, you are out of your mind if you think that was fun. Like, you need to go back and study history. Go back and if you don't want to read, there are movies out there like the movie Chernobyl. I don't know if you've seen that, but you talk about how horrible life was in the Soviet Union, the amount of disinformation, the people thrown in gulags just for disagreeing with the government, folks murdered just for disagreeing with the government. Like, that is what the word collectivism actually means when you put it into practice in government. And Mamdani's saying that's what he wants. It's bad. It's very bad.
Well, that wraps us up. We're on our first break now, so we'll head to it. But that is the truth. You're listening to Blake Barlam and State Auditor Shad White on the Andrew Gosser Show. We will be right back. All right, we are back on 103.9 WYAB out of Florida, Mississippi. One thing I didn't say earlier because I was focused on getting our guests shouted out. Go follow Andrew on X at Andrew Gosser, AndrewGasser. He has got me in the spot where I can have the state auditor on the show. First time I've ever solo hosting it. So last segment we were talking about Minnesota and the fraud there. And Mr. Auditor, you obviously are very, very well versed in fraud. You've uncovered millions, tens of millions of dollars here in the state, and we're thankful for that. Moving on from that, session starts. We talked about it in 2-3 days or whatever.
Yep.
What are you looking for out of this session?
Well, there are two things. The first is a set of bills that I'm going to be pushing for personally, and those are bills that do things like putting a fee on remittances. So those are payments going from Mississippi to foreign countries, and then using that money to create an illegal immigration task force, very similar to something Oklahoma has done. It's also very similar to something in the One Big Beautiful Bill that the president has put into place. I also think that we need to make illegal immigration a state crime, so that we can have our state and local law enforcement fully participate with ICE and helping to crack down on that. That'll be one big set of ideas, and it's important because by our estimation in the auditor's office, illegal immigration costs taxpayers about $100 million a year.
Wow.
So we have to crack down on waste, and this is a big way of doing it. We're gonna offer a bill that would cut fat out of state government, so cutting down on the number of cars in state government, cutting down on the amount of office space that government leases, which we do not need. So there's that kind of stuff. And then bigger picture, I think the legislature itself is going to have a huge debate over education and school choice this time. And so I think that's going to suck up a lot of energy and oxygen. And
education, that's the one thing that I've been really happy to see you talking about the most, that I really don't see another politician in the state talking about. I have a unique experience of having all three: private school, homeschool, and public school.
Oh, interesting.
I went to JA until I was about halfway through 8th grade. And then I was homeschooled for the rest of that year. And then I've been at Northwest Rankin High School, in high school. And I've gotten to see all three. And I will tell you that JA was very good in the early years because they focused on reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's very simple, got a good foundation. But then when I went to public school, and JA is a campus that is extremely small. And it's tucked in there in Sheffield Drive and Ridgewood. And they got Hanging Moss Creek right in the back of it. So they're not like growing. Yep. They can't grow the campus unless they like blow down a neighborhood. Yep. And I don't think they're going to do that. But they got so much done on that small campus, and with limited teachers, limited resources. I mean, they charge arm and a leg for tuition. I'll say that.
Yep.
But they got a lot more done with less. And when I went to Northwest Rankin, they had just built that new high school. It's huge.
Yep.
And they're still using the old middle school as the 9th grade building. So you've got a huge campus that I don't know what the square footage or whatever is, but there's still so many problems.
Yeah.
And then when I walk around and like admins driving around in their brand new 2025 GMC 2500s, that's great. Okay. If you can afford that. But why is admin grows every year?
Yep.
They've added another administrator every single year I've been there. And I've only been there for 4 years. And y'all point out the funding is like, why is all this money going to admin whenever teachers are still making this little money?
Yep. It's a huge, huge problem. We as a state spend more money on administration as a percentage of our K-12 budget than any other state in the South, which is a huge issue. And anytime you say that out loud, you have these education advocates and some administrators who will say, well, you're just attacking public education. No, I want public education to do well. I'm a product of our public schools. My mom was a public school teacher for 35 years. 2 of my 4 grandparents were public school teachers in rural Jones County. We've just got to get money going to teachers in the classroom. It makes no sense that we, once again, have the lowest paid teachers in the entire country. Teachers in some places still have to go out of pocket to buy their own classroom supplies. That's where the money needs to be going. And in any business, the business would say, well, that's where we make our money right there. That's where we should be putting our dollars. They would allocate dollars there. But in government, you have to have a forcing mechanism. You have to have somebody to come in and make that argument that the bureaucrats need to change the way these dollars are flowing.
Yeah. And it's been really weird to me, because I mean, the education numbers have improved in the last, few years or whatever. But I can just imagine how much better would it be if we dumped that money into teachers instead of the admin, just in general. Because I mean, I look at them like my teachers, like I have my calculus teacher. She'll be on maternity leave this next 9 weeks. It's like, And she would be able to do a lot more in the classroom, even though she was pregnant. If she just had a little bit more money, she wouldn't be stressed about getting to work and daycare and all that stuff.
Absolutely.
It would just help these teachers out that are raising the next generation.
Oh, yeah.
And if you want them to raise them the right way, allow them to do their job and make sure they have enough money in their pocket where they're not overwhelmed by the stress of life.
Or you would have a second calculus teacher. I mean, if you raise pay, you're going to get more people who are talented, who are interested in teaching. And so you get more more resources going into the classroom. That's where it really matters. And look, I've proposed a really simple fix. It's something that Texas has debated. If we don't do this in the next few years, I bet you some other red states are going to do it and we'll be left behind. We should be spending at least 50% of every education dollar on teacher salaries. Right now, it's at like 42, 43%. So we're not talking about a massive change, but this would be a huge, good first step.
Yeah.
And if you boost teacher pay in that way, you're talking about another $7,000-8,000 over what they get right now. They actually would become pretty competitive compared to our sister states around us. So that's what we ought to be doing. It's just common sense. But I don't think you'll get a ton of lawmakers who are willing to talk about this until somebody steps up, has some courage, and proves that you can win elections on messages like that. And then everybody will come along for the ride after that.
I'm really glad you say that, and how Mississippi needs to start getting their act together and start being a leader. I'm tired of the politicians, both at the federal and state level, that act like this state has always just sat in the back and has just listened to orders. Mississippi's a state that's never backed down from a fight. I mean, just look at the state's history. I mean, obviously the Civil War, but like just Katrina, Camille, all these storms and all the stuff that, Mississippi doesn't produce anybody. And then you look at the athletes and the authors and the history of the state. It's just rich. This is not a state that backs down. It's a state that leads.
That's right.
And I wish our leaders would embody that.
We need politicians who reflect that. That's exactly right. And to be honest with you, I think if we had elected officials with a little bit more courage, it would be easier to change some things in Mississippi than it is to change in Florida or Texas. Like if you want to, I mean, we for a while had supermajorities, Republican supermajorities in both the House and the Senate. We could have put into place a lot of these things that Florida had to fight years for. We could have done that long ago. But we choose to, I say we, a lot of our elected officials choose to kind of sit back. They don't like to be criticized. They don't want mean things said about them on Facebook or by some liberal journalist. And what you have to realize is that those folks who are saying those mean things, they're not going to like you anyway. You may as well just do what you think is right. Stand up, say it out loud, defend it, and then go get it done. And I think that Mississippi can really become a leader on a bunch of really important issues in the next 5 years if we have folks who don't care about criticism, but do care about normal working taxpayers.
Absolutely. And it's just like Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana would always say is, why are we giving all these money to foreign countries that hate us? They can hate us for free.
That's right. They're going to hate you anyway.
Exactly. And I don't know why in the world we would ever back down to, especially like in a state where we have super majorities. I paged for Brent Powell one week in my 10th grade year of high school. And we sat there for, I kid you not, 2 hours arguing over, I want to say it was like a few $1,000s of utility bills getting covered by the state in some county in northeast Mississippi. Sat there for 2 hours arguing over that. And it wasn't even representatives from that area that were arguing. It was all Democrats from Jackson. And we spent 2 hours arguing over that. That was a few $1,000s over like an electric bill. Really? That's what we're spending our time on whenever we could have been doing school choice, tax cuts, like
cutting down on Medicaid fraud.
Exactly.
They'll argue over a few $1,000s here and there. And my audit teams have found that consistently in Medicaid, there's anywhere between $60 and $140 million a year going out the door to people who don't seem to be eligible to be on the program. So you want to argue about a few $1,000s, or do you want to do the difficult thing and actually crack down on Medicaid fraud? The reason they don't touch Medicaid fraud is the same reason they don't touch other hard problems. As soon as you do it, the newspapers will write about you. Oh, you hate poor people. Well, no, don't worry about what the newspaper reporters are saying. Focus on what the right thing to do is. And if you do that, you can save a ton of money. You can use that money for tax cuts, roads and bridges, teacher salaries, cop salaries, the stuff that actually matters.
Imagine a Delta infrastructure bill that the state passes. Like just what that would do to the state. You revitalize the Delta, you bring the state back. And you bring Jackson back, to be honest, because Jackson's the key to the Delta. You got 55 and 20 right there.
That's right.
And 49. So really hope that we can get that done. State Auditor, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for
having me. It's
been a blast.
So y'all listen to 103.9 WYAB. We will be right back.
Awesome.
And we are back on 103.9 WYAB on the Andrew Gotcha Show. Y'all just heard State Auditor Shad White knock it out of the park on that first two segments of the show, talking about the fraud in Minnesota and then what the state needs as well. And the state of Mississippi does need a lot of help, and I'm glad that we have someone like him in the position that he's in so that we can make that stuff happen. I know a lot of you know last session, the big thing that they ended session with was whenever they were doing all the tax cuts and the appropriations and everything, they were trying to cut his funding out of his office. That is like the most absurd thing I've ever heard of. You're going to try to take power away from the state auditor whenever you know that there's massive welfare fraud, not only being uncovered in the state of Mississippi, but across the country. Whenever they were trying to do that, that's when Doge was at its peak. That's when Elon and all of the staffers they had at Doge, they were uncovering like 100, I think it was like 100,000, it may have been more than that, dead people on Social Security across the whole country. And you're telling me that you're going to sit here and try to take money away from our state auditor while you're uncovering that? Now, we all know what it was. It was Delbert Hosemann trying to play political games and taking money away from his political opponents a couple years ahead of the governor's election. But, we can't talk about that. So I want to move on a little bit. It's going to be related. So a lot of you have been hearing about the Minnesota fraud. I know we've talked about it a lot here on the Andrew Gosser show lately. But what they uncovered is that the fraud potentially implicates some of the Democratic campaigns that have been run recently. And they found there's been some more people like Nick Shirley who have done private journalism, that the money that these daycares were supposedly getting was immediately being funneled back into Democratic campaigns. Let that pause for a second and ponder on that. That is ginormous. Now, I know that we have been talking about that a lot, is that a lot of these entitlement programs were essentially turned into money laundering campaigns for Act Blue and the Democratic, like the DNC. And I think that's what we're starting to get a glimpse of. That's why they've been so against Doge. That's why they hate people like Nick Shirley who are trying to do independent journalism. Nick Shirley hasn't been this like sphere in MAGA for years. He used to be a prank YouTuber. And in just one video that he posted on Twitter that now has over 125 million views, he uncovered $9 billion in daycare fraud. And like we've been saying, that has grown just about every single day. You don't get the backlash from the governor of Minnesota and CNN and CBS and all of the other wackadoos in the national corporate media if you're not uncovering something big. If it wasn't that big, they would just leave it alone. That's why they don't talk about half the stuff that you can find on Twitter. It's because they just don't think it's that big. But this, they realized how big it was. $9 billion. I still can't get over that number. And that was just in a week. I still can't get over that. I keep repeating it. So this is from, I've been finding it on Twitter because I want to find something where, it's good. You can see the story. Is that Minnesota Democrats covered up the 2020 voter fraud in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where Liban Mohammed created a video of himself on his Snapchat account making self-incriminating confessions that he had illegally harvested 300 absentee ballots. And that is from Senator Steve Drokowski, who I'm pretty sure is a state senator out of Minnesota. And that brings me to my next point. We talked about this the other day. In the state of Minnesota, you can not only register to vote on election day, but you can vouch for the address of 8 other people in Minnesota. 8 other people at one address. That is insane to me. And if it's not insane to you, you might need some help. And then another thing we talked about is that 19% of the people that voted in Minnesota in 2008, whenever Barack Obama got elected president for the first time, 19% of people that voted in Minnesota vote or registered to vote on election day. I'm pausing because I want y'all to ponder on that for a second. A fifth of the vote registered to vote on election day. How much time do you think people had to make sure that those people lived in Minnesota, were real, weren't vouching for 8 other fake people? I'm really sure Minnesota is really gung-ho about voter fraud. Seems like it, right? If they can defraud the public of $9 billion, which is probably a much bigger number, but that's just the confirmed total right now, imagine how many votes they can defraud. Whenever you don't have to show ID, the AG's office in Minnesota is not going to do a darn thing. And the governor certainly won't. And then you had Barack Obama win, so they're not going to do anything about it. In case you didn't know, there was an election for United States Senator in Minnesota that year as well that was won by the Democrat, put that in air quotes, by around 1,000 votes. And keep in mind, a fifth of the, how many ever hundreds of thousands, millions that voted on election day, a fifth of those people registered to vote on election day. That is insane. That is it really, really, really insane. And I don't think people are talking about it enough because they've been distracted by all sorts of other things. But thankfully, the Trump admin has been paying attention to it. I'm going to pull up here the statistics here in a second of all the stuff that they've done, but they have freezed not only Medicaid and Medicare funding for daycares in Minnesota, but across the country. And they're going to require new verifications in order to get that funding. That is simple common sense. And I'm kind of shocked that that wasn't implemented to begin with. But secondly, I know civil rights attorney Harmeet Dillon also just sued the state and then is going to be questioning them about their, vouching for 8 people that they do when registering people to vote. See, here it is. So to date, the Department of Justice has charged 98 total defendants in several Medicaid fraud and related case programs in the state of Minnesota. The Department of Homeland Security is on the ground going door to door, conducting large-scale criminal and Homeland Security investigations. And Homeland Security began requiring a justification, receipt, or photo evidence for all child care related payments nationwide. Required Minnesota to conduct a full audit of child care centers. Be really nice if Minnesota had a state auditor like Shad White, making sure that there wasn't any fraud in the state. And then Homeland Security also, their Health and Human Services, froze $185 million in funding to Minnesota for their daycares. Those are simple steps that the Trump admin took within a matter of days. And I'm thankful that they were able to get that done. And I can't wait to see where exactly all of that goes. They've already gotten, 60 convictions, I think it is. And there's probably going to be more, Lord willing, as long as these activist judges stop monkeying around and stuff. We keep talking about this because if this is what they've uncovered in one YouTube video or Twitter video, in Minnesota, it really, really, really begs the question, what is going on in California? What is going on in New York or Washington State and Oregon? These places that have been run by, in case you don't know the politics of like the Pacific Northwest, I mean, I'm surprised Bernie Sanders hasn't moved there. He'd be perfect there. Radical left socialists. Whenever they were all protesting outside of the ICE facilities in Portland, I would pull up some of the videos and watch these lunatics scream for hours. And it almost looked like an SNL skit. But that's like the everyday person out there. It's wild. I mean, God bless them. And I hope that they eventually find their way back, but goodness gracious. Minnesota's not quite like that. I mean, Tim Walz is their governor, so they got enough problems. But, just what kind of fraud do you think is going on out there? And in case you don't know, those states have refused to turn over their SNAP data and their Medicare and their Medicaid data to the federal government, who is just trying to simply audit it and make sure that it's going to, for one, Americans, and two, people that actually need it and not just people who don't want to go work. Those states have refused to turn over that data, and they've been sued by the Trump administration because of it, as they should. The American people have been defrauded for decades at this point. Decades. And until people really start to talk about it, I don't really think enough's going to get done. Now, thankfully, it's blown up here in the last week because of Minnesota. But if you spend all of your time talking about what's going on in Russia, what's going on in Iran, in Israel, in China, in North Korea, if you spend all of your time talking about these conspiracy theories, what's going to happen back home? People would love to think that, Iran or Russia or Israel controls the federal government. And okay, that's great. Have your theories. You find some evidence, great, let's talk about it. But if that's what you're distracted by, this fraud is going to completely go under the wayside. It's bewildering to me that the same people that have been trying to tell Donald Trump to focus on domestic policy are the same ones who, to this day, spend all of their time talking about Israel and Iran and the Middle East. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Also, the same people that lie about Trump's deportation numbers. Don't get it twisted, folks. Over 2.5 million people have been deported by the Trump administration so far. But what they did is they offered $1,000 to self-deport. And if you don't know the math on like how much it costs to, for one, detain someone in ICE and then deport them eventually, costs a lot more than $1,000. So they are saving the country money by letting these people self-deport. So don't get it twisted, folks. Over 2.5 million people deported so far. And the more and more that you get those people out of the country that don't need to be here, who are not supposed to be here, the more and more that the American citizen is going to get the help that they deserve. And we can really figure out where this money needs to go. We were talking about that these entitlement programs are way bigger than they were ever supposed to be. Way bigger than they were ever supposed to be. And there's been massive fraud. And if we want to rein in inflation and if we want to rein in our national debt and our deficit, you start at these entitlement programs. And President Trump and Stephen Miller and Doge, they've all made it that they have made that their priority. And you haven't seen the results of it because the big beautiful bill can't take effect until 2026. Well, guess what? We're here now. So it's going to get rocking and rolling before the midterms. And that's going to be great news for our country, hopefully. And hopefully Congress gets their act together too. Don't get it twisted. They need to pass a SAVE Act in the Senate that has been on Leader Thune's desk since he took oath of office. They've still got a lot to do, but President Trump thankfully was able to get a lot done. All right, we're going to go to our last break here. You're listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. We will be right back. And we are back on the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. It's been an eventful first hour. We had the State Auditor Shad White on the show. Got to answer some questions about the fraud in Minnesota and fraud in general in the federal government because we all know how big it is. And I think it's just good because that's what people want to know. They want to learn these questions. That's why they were so curious about Doge. And, if Doge had been codified by Congress, then we could probably have gotten a lot more done with that because temporary federal employees can only work for 100 days before they have to step back that's just the law. And in case you don't know who the chairman of the Doge Committee in Congress was, it was Marjorie Taylor Greene, who did absolutely nothing and then decided to abandon her constituents and retire from Congress once President Trump did not endorse her for her essentially suicidal run for Georgia governor or senator. So don't get it twisted. That's the story there. And hopefully it really is, we only have a couple minutes here before we have to go to the break between hours. But I mean, it is almost insane to me how much Congress has really fumbled the ball. They got the big beautiful bill passed, and that's great. But the SAVE Act, so that's election integrity, and then they need to do more to codify executive orders. Some more energy packages would probably be nice. And then we only have a couple minutes here, so this is something that I just want to touch on because it's been really prevalent across Twitter the last couple of days. Is the filibuster? The filibuster has been sacred. It's been in there for the Senate for a while, But what do you think the Democrats are going to do as soon as they get back into office? They're going to nuke the filibuster, and whenever they do that, and they control the Senate, they're going to try to pack the court. That's what they're going to do. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. They've almost publicly said it, basically. Pack the courts, make D.C. and Puerto Rico states, and they're going to try to ensure that the Democrats never lose control again. That was their goal in 2020. It didn't quite work because the American people made 2024 too big to rig. But it will happen if Republicans continue to sit back, enjoy their cushy majority, and then lose it so that they can wait out President Trump's term. That's the real story going into 2026. The story is it's not Israel, it's not Russia, it's not China, it's not Iran. What will Republicans do to make sure that they win in November? That's the real question. That's the real question. And if you want to make sure that we can get that victory in 2026, talk about the successes of the president, call him out when he needs to be called out, be honest with the American people. That's what they want to hear. They want honesty and they want results. And we can give it to them. That's it for the first hour. We will be back. Thank you for listening to 103.9 WYAB. That's right. You were listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. We're streaming on Rumble. We're streaming on X. We're streaming on YouTube. And 50,000 watts on the radio. And if you can't find the stream, you can't listen on the radio, WYAB.com is where you can find the show as well. We're starting here on the second hour of January 2nd, 2026. Can't believe we're here. Now, the first hour, we got to hear me talk for a lot. Now, I want to turn it over to the host who has gotten me in this spot and who has allowed me to do this and has done so many things for him. Andrew Gosser, how are you doing today?
My brother, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. You are performing admirably. I'm getting all sorts of texts saying that you're the future. You're a natural. Really enjoying the show. So, Blake, you're going places. It's awesome, man. Good job.
Well, thank you. And I love to hear it. And I hope to get better every single day. And I'm thankful to people like Andrew for putting me in the spot that they're in. But most importantly, I'm thankful for God for making these opportunities possible.
That's right.
That leads me in case you weren't listening to the first hour, our Bible verse for today is Romans 12:8. If it is to encourage, then give encouragement. If it is giving, then give generously. If it is to lead, do it diligently. And if it is to show mercy, do it cheerfully. And I believe that is God's command to us to do what he has called us to do. Your first passion in life should be to find what God has planned for you, and you can truthfully live out the life that Christ has planned for you that is perfect beyond anything we can think of, if that is what you make your priority. Andrew, it is Friday, which means that it is Founder Friday, which is a new thing you were doing on the show.
Yep.
Take it away.
You know, when we had our last show last year, I know it seems like it's been a little bit, but since we did our show last year, I said that on the Friday, we're going to have our Founding Father Fridays. And I wanted to use this platform to go ahead and educate us all on who some of these founding fathers were that we should learn about in college and in high school, but we don't necessarily do. So for me personally, how I'm looking at it is that this is the opportunity to do that. But before I get into the Founding Father Friday, I just want to let you know that today is the 30-year anniversary of Mogadishu, Somalia, where we lost, I believe it was 17 brave Americans and another 75 plus. I was less than 5 miles away from that, man. We were on the USS America right off the coast. You had 14 F-14As, not ready to drop bombs yet. We weren't equipped to that. But I think we had 16 A-6E intruders from VA-85. We had 24 FA-18s from Strike Fighter Squadron 82 and 86. And we didn't even know about it until it was well underway.
Goodness
and
gracious.
It just goes to show you how warfare has developed over that. If we would have known,
really has.
we could have just completely leveled the whole city.
It is kind of wild. I mean, you think World War I was just 100 years ago, and you had
Yep.
people fighting in trenches and barely gaining any ground in a day, and now like you can be in California dropping a drone
Yep.
in Afghanistan. That's just crazy. All right, sorry.
Yep.
That's take it away.
That's awesome. But it just so when you hear Brother Blake going on about Somalia or me going about it, it's a big thing. And the other last thing I want to say about this, in 1993, how many Somalis were in the United States back then?
A lot less than there are now.
Mm-hmm. You wonder why. So today's first founding father that we're going to talk about, you all know him. You all love him. You all heard about him in grade school and middle school and high school. George Reed from Delaware. Yeah, you know that guy, right? He was born in 1930 or 1733, and he died in 1798. He was a founding father from Delaware. He is considered the chief negotiator for the Great Compromise, which actually allowed us to get our not a Declaration of Independence, but our Constitution of the United States. He wasn't really known for as a great orator. He wasn't one of those people out there who is giving all these public quotes that so many people on both sides of the argument try to do. He was an attorney. His family came from Ireland, and then they settled in Delaware. And he was just a really kind of laid back kind of dude. He was an attorney, so that's kind of one thing that was kind of against him when I was doing my research on him. And he ended up being the author of Delaware's Constitution. He ended up actually writing that. And so when they sent him to the convention, the Constitutional Convention, they had to make sure that they maintained equal rights for the smaller states. And the reason that we have the Electoral College, the reason that we have the weighted or the the Senate, where you can only have 2 senators. So that way, all the smaller states have just as much representation as all the larger states.
Yeah.
And he's also one of the architects behind it, who actually said, okay, the Senate's going to be for 6 years, and the House of Representatives term is going to be for 2 years.
Yeah.
The House of Representatives is the people's house. The Senate is the state's house.
Yeah.
And it's kind of screwy too, because when we made that amendment to have our U.S. senators elected by the people, it was never supposed to be that way. And people have always said, why do we have an electoral college voter system? Well, this is why. It's because these smaller states, like Mississippi, like Delaware, we need that representation.
We were talking about that the other day, is that a democracy can be just as tyrannical as a monarchy.
Mhm.
And if you let it get out of hand, I mean, if democracy is really your standard for everything, I mean, they could justify slavery, they could justify genocide. It's majority rules. And whenever your moral system and how you view the world is just is completely reliant on preference, then there's no justification. Like, you can't justify one thing and not justify the other if preference is the only thing that you're going on, and majority rules is what you base it all on. So yeah, that's absolutely right, Andrew.
And it's so fascinating. And I've got like probably 30 minutes worth of material here, so I'm going to cut it down a little bit. You know, he went to a private school, but before he went to private school, he actually listened to his father and got educated at home. And when he went to his private school, that's when he learned Greek and Latin, because English wasn't enough. This guy was incredibly intelligent, incredibly smart. And
I don't know why we don't encourage that more these days. Is to go out and, like, learning Spanish and French in high school is great, but I can tell you, I took Spanish 1 and Spanish 2. We did jack all in that class. My teacher was great, love her to death, but I couldn't. Puedo ir al baño, where's the bathroom? I can tell you that, but that's about the extent to where my knowledge of that is. But I think we need to get Latin and Greek and all these things back into our schools, because that is what we really, found a lot of these ideas and these, complex philosophies on, is stuff like that.
We've got to go back, and we've got to be able to read the original Greek. And people are like, why Greek? Well, because we're lied to about how they portray the Bible. And just for me and my own growth, I find myself reading Greek a lot more, and I can sort of read it. I can't really pronunciate it or speak it fluently, but it's definitely something that we need to do. We
Yeah.
have to figure out what is important for us to learn and what is not important for us to learn.
I think we've had a pretty decent trial run here in the last, couple of decades, especially. But you're right. I think we do need to go back and read the original Latin, read the original Greek and the Roman.
Yep.
That is so important, because the Bible has absolutely, people have tried to take advantage of the Bible and tried to mistranslate it so that they can justify their sin. Make no mistake about it.
Yep.
And they're trying to change the scripture every day, and they're trying to convince people that the greatest sin is judgment. The greatest sin is not judgment. The greatest sin is the blaspheming of God. That is the greatest sin.
Yep.
Telling someone that a sin is wrong is not judging them. We're all sinners. None of us are perfect, but that doesn't mean you can't call out someone else's sin. As long as you recognize that you yourself are a sinner, you can tell other people that their sin is wrong. Because we should all encourage each other to do better every single day and not be scared to hurt someone's feelings. Do you think Jesus cared about the feelings of the tax collectors in the temple when he flipped over their tables?
No.
I don't think so. And I think that's what we need to get back to. We need to get back to understanding that judgment is not the greatest sin. It is the blaspheming of the Holy Spirit.
Yep. And it's funny how things keep going back to certain images, whether it be Christ flipping over the tables of the tax collectors, or going after the tax collectors, or anything like that. Our founding fathers shared much of this. Listen to this. And you have to have stones to be able to do what this guy did, George Reed. He threatened to walk out on the Constitutional Congress on June 16th, 1787, when William Patterson presented the New Jersey Plan, which Reed declared Delaware's delegates were, quote unquote, restrained by their commission and would leave the convention if equal state right votes were not preserved. And this freaked everybody out, because they're like, oh, it's only Delaware. Well, then he coalesced all the other smaller states, like, this is a great idea. Alignment with the small states through Reed personally favored a strong federal government. So Reed, his own personal beliefs were big government good, small government bad. But because of what Delaware put the restrictions on him of what he was supposed to do, he followed that.
That's amazing, isn't it? He listened to his constituents.
Imagine that.
In a time where you could probably cover up a lot more stuff because he didn't have social media. It takes like days for a letter to get from like 5 miles down the road.
Yep.
Imagine if we had that today with everything that we have now. That is why we need to listen to our founding fathers more.
We do. We have to actually know who our founding fathers are. And I'm going to put on my 2026 bingo card, I'm guessing that 98% of the listeners of the Andrew Gosser Show, being guest hosted by Blake Bartlam today, did not have George Reed on their bingo card, or it's the first founding father we were going to talk about.
I didn't.
Nope. And that's the great thing. I'm learning all this too. So we're sharing it. We're growing the audience together. It's really good.
And that's great. And we're forever thankful that you want to do something like this, because it is blatantly obvious in schools today. It is blatantly obvious in college. And then in the real world, especially whenever people actually start talking about these ideas outside of just an educational setting, is that they don't know what the founding fathers really intended for this country.
Yep.
They will try to justify essentially anchor babies with the 14th Amendment, and then tell you in the next breath that the founding fathers were a bunch of racist bigots.
Yep.
You really think they wrote the Constitution with anchor babies in mind, but at the same time just couldn't wait to get home to their slaves? These people, they're not serious.
Nope.
And they don't think about this stuff, but they love to take things out of context so that they can justify their corrupt worldview.
Yep.
And we can't let them do it.
Listen to this. Pressure leading to compromise. Reed's firm stance alongside other small state delegates from New Jersey, Connecticut, and others helped force the issue at hand. This pressure directly contributed to the formation committee, including Oliver Ellsworth and Roger Sherman of Connecticut, who proposed the Great Compromise, which was accepted. Once the Great Compromise was passed, and again, that was, I believe, July 16th, 1787, if I did my research right, Reed and the Delaware delegation stayed and signed the Constitution on September 17th. Now, Blake, what is the one thing we haven't really talked about with George Reed? We haven't, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but we really haven't talked about his Christian principles. Yeah. We see how that works here on the Andrew Gosser Show. We know it's a biblical worldview, and it goes on, and it says that George Reed didn't really have a lot of public statements on faith.
Mm-hmm.
But do you know he was the one who authored the language for the statement of faith? Listen to this. I, Andrew Gosser, do profess faith in God the Father and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, and the Holy Ghost, one God, blessed forevermore. And I do acknowledge the Holy Scriptures of the Old and New Testament to be given by divine inspiration.
Wow.
You had to sign that before you could run for office back in early America.
Wow.
George Reed was the one who authored that language. So that doesn't sound like an atheist or a deist to me.
No, not at all. And that's what we're trying to change in this country, where instead of trying to justify your politics by misquoting scripture, instead, let your faith and the truth influence the world. And we're going to take it to our first break. You're listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. We will be right back. And we are back on 103.9 WYAB on the Andrew Gosser Show. Andrew, where can they find you on X?
At Andrew Gosser, AndrewGasser. Where can they find you on it,
They
sir?
can find on X, they can find me at B Bartlam, so at B and then BARTLAM. And then you can find me at Blake Bartlam on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. TikTok's a wild scene, I'll just say that. So good luck over there. Now, we were talking about all of the fraud and everything like that with your taxpayer dollars. Here is some fraud in messaging. In case you didn't know, on January 12th of this year, so here in, I guess it'd be what, 10 days? Yeah, because it's the second. So in 10 days, a grand jury will convene in southern Florida revolving Crossfire Hurricane. And if you don't know what that is, that was the name for the FBI operation that essentially created the Russia hoax that they tried to get President Trump on back in his first term. You know, saying that he colluded with Russia to win the 2016 election. I'm pausing just to make sure you realize how stupid that sounds. It's ridiculous. And it's been proven to be ridiculous time and time again. And because President Trump is back in office, we might finally get some consequences for that. Grand juries take a long time. I understand people, I'm frustrated just as you are at the lack of action at the DOJ. But I will say this. It takes a long time for these grand juries to happen and for indictments to follow them, especially when there is this much evidence and discovery and testimony that needs to happen. You're not dealing with a few staffers at the FBI. You could potentially be dealing with the FBI director at the time, McCabe, John Brennan, Peter Strzok, even to an extent, some high-level senior Obama staffers, and potentially Hillary Clinton staffers, that all, even, they're not going to have Obama testify, but it does go to him, and Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard said it does.
Yep.
He pulled the trigger on this. All of this ties in to Crossfire Hurricane. And if you remember, on an August morning in 2022, you woke up to the news, President Trump's house has been raided because of classified documents that he had. Now, in case you haven't read the National Records Act, which I hope you haven't because it was extremely boring, but I have.
God bless you, sir.
And it talks about how many presidents have taken documents with them, and then a lot of it has to do with like their presidential library, stuff like that. And then whenever you dig into the some of the filings and some of the rulings in the classified documents case that Justice Elaine Cannon was overseeing before the election, it shows that the National Archives and the National Records Association actually gave President Trump back around 75% of the documents that the FBI claimed were criminal.
What's really infuriating to me is we all remember waking up to that, and CNN was there before even half the FBI was there. It reminds me of the Marines going to shore in East Africa, and they're literally doing an amphibious landing, going through the lights with the CNN cameras. And
Yeah.
I'm so over CNN.
Yeah.
But there was a photo that came out from that raid where they had all the secret, confidential, top secret, and that was all staged and manipulated.
Yep.
There was no classified information in that.
No.
There was nothing behind those papers. They had to admit that was a staged photo.
Yep.
And you're not supposed to do that.
No.
And so this whole Crossfire Hurricane thing, that's going to have legs. And something that the judge Eileen Cannon said is when that case was eventually dismissed, she retained jurisdiction over that if the FBI ever wanted to come back and look at this again, she retains the lordship over that case. Yeah. So now it's looking like not only did she throw it out against the sitting FBI director at the time, or whoever was sitting at the FBI,
and Jack Smith.
Yeah. Now he's going to have to go up in front and now explain everything that he did.
And that's great. And I think that I hope, knock on wood, Lord willing, that we will get multiple indictments out of this, because now we know, and Kash Patel essentially confirmed this, is that they did not raid President Trump's home because they believed he criminally withheld classified documents. They raided his home because they knew that President Trump had documents that the National Archives had given back to him that related to Crossfire Hurricane. They knew that if President Trump found those documents and that if he was to win that election that he was going to run, that he did win, thankfully, that he was going to reopen this case and these people were going to finally face justice for the crimes and ultimately treason, in my opinion, against the American people, where they tried to destroy President Trump before he even took office in January of 2017. They tried to drag him down even before the election, saying that he was going to cozy up to President Putin. You know what President Putin did in 2014, 2 years before the election? They seized Crimea. They won Crimea because Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton could not negotiate to save their lives.
Nope.
And many Ukrainians and Russians were dead because of it. Thousands, tens of thousands of them. And now we're back at it again because of the failures of the foreign policy of the Biden-Harris regime. They invaded Ukraine. President Trump was different. President Trump gave Ukraine the javelins, gave them weapons, because he knew peace through strength is a much better deterrent than sending them blankets and MREs.
Yep.
Ukraine has enough food, okay? One of the reasons your bread prices went up is because they had so much bread that they couldn't ship out because of the blockade, okay? That's great and all. I'm sure they love their little fuzzy blankets, but that didn't prevent Russia from invading. What prevented them was from 2017 to early 2021, President Trump was in office and peace through strength was the foreign policy of the United States of America. That's what's different. And while all that was going on, they were trying to fabricate this lie that there was Russia collusion. But now, because this grand jury is convening here in 10 days in Florida, you might finally get some charges and finally get some more indictments out of all of this. Ultimately, I believe that this was treason, and treason should be dealt with as such if that is found that they are guilty of that. You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes, Andrew. I say that all the time. That's true in a lot of cases. In a lot of cases. It could be something as small as something that happens at school.
Mm-hmm.
Or when you try to defraud the American people who sent a mandate when they elected Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton in 2016.
There has to be consequences for your
Has
actions.
to be.
And it's just not sitting on the stoop for 3 minutes while you consider those actions.
No.
There needs to be indictments, there needs to be prosecutions, and there needs to be meaningful sentences handed out. And we not just with Crossfire Hurricane, but with all this fraud that's been uncovered, all the fraud that Shad White has uncovered, there needs to be prosecutions there. And it's a problem when it doesn't happen.
It is a problem. And what people fail to realize is, I'm going to ask a couple questions here. If Donald Trump could unilaterally hand out indictments and hand out criminal charges against these people, it would have been done, I assure you, when the clock hit 12:01 p.m. on January 20th, 2025.
He would have had those in the can ready to go.
He would have. The problem is that the government it's very slow because of how big it is. You have the Department of Justice, Pam Bondi, and then she has to relegate these cases out to the regions that they're in. So this one's in the Southern District of Florida. Lindsay Halligan is the one doing the ones in D.C. and New York. So you have all these things that have to work together in order to get one indictment and one charge. If President Trump could do it, he would.
Yep.
If Shad White could arrest some of these people for the massive fraud in Mississippi, he would. The problem is, and Michael Watson faces this issue too, is that if the Attorney General and if she doesn't do anything, if Lynn Finch and Pam Bondi don't do anything, then nothing can happen. Nothing can happen. In order for these charges to get acted upon, they have to be brought to court. And so that is the issue that we have been facing, but hopefully it gets corrected, because this is an issue, and it's not just Crossfire Hurricane. I don't know how many of you saw Jack Smith's testimony to the House Judiciary Committee the other day, where he essentially admitted they had no evidence to tie President Trump to the incitement of violence on January 6th. Now, if you've watched the hours and hours of footage from January 6th that I have, you would know that the only reason that crowd really got violent is because the cops shot tear gas, munitions, and flashbangs into the crowd whenever they were standing there singing the national anthem. That's why that crowd got radicalized. That crowd was standing there peacefully for about an hour. And you can go watch the same security footage that I watched. I watched a ton of it because I was really bored one day. And so that is what people need to realize, that things take time, but keep the pressure on, and hopefully we get results. That pushes us up to our next break. You were listening to 103.9 WYAB. We will be right back. And we are back on 103.9 WYAB on the Andrew Gosser Show. We have talked a lot of domestic stuff today, Andrew.
Yep.
We have talked a lot of domestic. Now, bear with me for a second. You're going to think I'm being hypocritical because we're going to talk about something foreign for a second. But I think it's important. And in case you missed it this morning, which, to be honest, if you didn't miss it, I'm going to be concerned because that means you spend as much time on your phone as I do. President Trump put out a statement today revolving around Iran. And I'm going to provide a little context here because the context is extremely important. So obviously Israel and Iran had themselves a little, 10-day war basically over the summer, where Iran, I think they hit one missile out of like a few thousand that they shot at Israel. One of them landed. And I'm pretty sure that it didn't even destroy like anything. So that's what was going on over the summer. And because of this conflict, President Trump made the decision to end the conflict when he destroyed Iran's nuclear program. They're not going to be able to build a nuclear bomb anytime soon. And we know that they were able to get a lot of the uranium because of the horrible deal that Barack Obama negotiated back in his second term. So there's some of the context. The other context is that since all of that happened, Iran their regime has lost a lot of their grip on power. And over the last week or so, they have had massive protests. The Iran regime is slipping, and they're losing control over the regular people there. And they're living in a much more tyrannical state than we could ever, the Democrats could ever hope of implementing here. So these people they've been able to break the lies that their government has been telling them. And they're fed up with it. So President Trump put out a statement this morning that said, if Iran shoots or violently kills peaceful protesters, which is their custom, the United States of America will come to their rescue. We are locked and loaded and ready to go. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Now, immediately, the talking heads on the right are going to be like, President Trump wants to go into the Middle East and have another forever war. He's been sold out to the military-industrial complex. He's been sold out to Israel. If President Trump was really sold out to those people, there would already be boots on the ground in Iran right now in combat. Israel and the military-industrial complex, whenever President Trump bombed the nuclear program, they wanted that to not be a bombing of their nuclear program, but an invasion with troops. That's what they wanted. That's what Israel and the military-industrial complex wanted. But President Trump knew that if you want to end that war instead of prolonging it and making it some big thing like Afghanistan and Iraq and the Gulf War, bomb their nuclear programs right there. Iran will send a message. They'll get the message. And they got the message. They stopped. And Israel listened too. They stopped as well. President Trump understands that these people, they've been fighting for so long. And he said, I'm not going to say it because it was rather explicit, but they don't know what they're doing. And they want to keep fighting. But President Trump knows that they should not. And they can't because people are just going to keep dying. And if there's one thing that President Trump hates, and that is it's people dying. We see that with his negotiations in Ukraine, in the Middle East, and the Abraham Accords, and the way that he aggressively pursues not only pro-life policies, but stopping drugs from flowing into our country. So this is not President Trump threatening to send in, 200,000 American troops or whatever, and having like a war, a ground war. This is him saying that the United States is paying attention. And whenever the government of Iran tries to spin this out on their people, they're going to realize that their regime is even worse than they thought. All this is doing is ensuring that the Iranian regime crumbles because its own people are going to protest enough. That's what's going to happen here. So no, this is not some call for war. People haven't paid it for whatever reason, Andrew. I don't understand it. People love to just twist what President Trump says whenever he's been doing this for 10 years.
What I think, and I can't say it from a Zoomer perspective, I'm going to say it from the Xer perspective, right? People like me who've done over 20 years in the military, have gone in anywhere that Generation X was sent to go kick butt and chew bubble gum, we did. And we got stuck into this global war on terror. And the premise is correct. You fight the global war on terror over there so that our citizens over here don't have to see the stuff that I saw, right?
Mhm.
But that only can work for so long if you are accurately doing it. And what we were doing it right for about, and people are going to get mad at me for saying this, but under George Bush, and I can tell you because I was frontline CGO going out and doing the nation's
Yeah.
business, we were gone. But under Obama, until I got out in 2011, we were doing less and less of that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we started importing the world's troublemakers into
Yeah.
the United States of America. First a little trickle at a time. Now look at it,
No,
right?
it's massive. 20 million in 4 years.
Yep.
So it's really just telling because President Trump is very good at sending cryptic messages. He's not all when it comes to this stuff, whatever he says, don't take it at face value. I mean, why do you think he sent the leader of the Taliban a picture of his home? Okay. Peace through strength works. And we have seen that time and time again. Time and time again. Peace through strength works. I'm going to listen a lot more to someone who I know can beat me up than someone who I know is just talking.
The thing about it too is with peace through strength, you have to hold those countries accountable. If the first time you let one off the hook, it's like they all get on their
Yeah.
test phones and say, "Oh, look at we're not getting smoked this time." Oh,
Yeah.
And it goes down just a really negative road.
And that's why we saw that whenever President Trump gave the warning to Nigeria, stop slaughtering these innocent Christians.
Yep.
And they didn't listen. And 2 months later, on Christmas Day,
Yeah.
President Trump and the Department of War and our fantastic military blew up over 80 targets in Nigeria. 80 ISIS targets.
That
Because they didn't listen.
and the thing about it is you wonder how closely didn't Nigeria actually ask for help going after some of those?
The government, the government of Nigeria helped, or they asked for help, and they helped locate some of these targets. But obviously, that government's been almost overrun by ISIS.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like Vichy France during the Second World War, where
Yeah.
the government of France isn't really the government of France. But that's what happened, and I think that's what we're seeing here again. Is that President Trump is trying to ensure that the people of Iran crumble that regime where the U.S. doesn't even have to lift a finger. Iran certainly knows that President Trump will lift a finger if he needs to, and he can do it, where we had like 4 B-2 stealth bombers and a bunch of other aircraft and Navy in the Gulf over there go in undetected, blow up everything for them without a single American getting a hair harmed.
Yep.
And that is how you do it. You don't go in there and have some long war where we're stuck over there for 20 more years, and then we have to have another disastrous withdrawal like we had in Vietnam and Afghanistan. You do it where you send a quick message, but it's a big message without Americans getting harmed.
And let me just add one thing to that. If you are going to send in troops on the ground, you have to play to win. The rules of engagement, the laws of armed conflict, the ROE that was established and put on us made it virtually impossible to make on the field decisions. We knew what it was, but you were always wondering, is the JAG officer behind me going to like what I did and come back and say, "Oh, what you did was improper." And all of a sudden you're finding yourself not in front of a firing squad or fighting the enemy, but you're in front of a bunch of lawyers and
Yeah.
a military tribunal or a court martial because you were just following what you were set to do.
Right.
And the inherent right to self-defense shall never be denied. That's all I'm going to say about that.
And that's perfect. And that people need to understand that. But really just what I wanted to get at is because I've already seen it on Twitter. It's been ridiculous. Is that President Trump has not been sold out to Israel or the military industrial complex. If he was, we would have been in a war in the Middle East with hundreds of thousands of troops on the ground for months at this point. For over half a year at this point. So don't listen to people when they say that. They're just trying to get you, they're just trying to lie to you so that they can take back control, and then they're going to do what they want to do. So don't listen to people when they say that. But we're here to sift through the BS for you so you can actually figure out what is going on. But that's what's been going on in the world, and we hope and we pray for peace, and that we hope that Iran, their tyrannical regime, crumbles because of the people protesting there, and that we don't even have to lift a finger. That would be the ideal scenario, and that is what President Trump is playing for. And we hope that it succeeds so that the Middle East can get even more stable than it already is. Remember, it was mid-October before President Trump had gotten peace in Gaza and Israel. the Abraham Accords are working. And we hope and pray that they continue to work so that people can stop dying, people can stop suffering, and hopefully they get a little bit of peace in that region because they have been fighting for a long time.
Long time.
They've been fighting for all of my life. They've been fighting for all of your life, and probably all of everyone listening. That region has been fighting, and so hopefully it works out, and we're praying that it does. Got about 2 more minutes here, Andrew. Anything you want to comment on? You have a unique perspective on this because you actually did fight over there.
Yeah, and I've been to. I'm not bragging, but I've been to Israel 3 times and been all up and down there. And the truth is since Israel was founded, they've never truly been at peace. They've always been under attack from different forces, whether it been from Egypt, whether it been indirectly from Iran and using organizations like Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and Hezbollah to fight the proxy war, whether it's been Iraq and what they've done to go invade Kuwait, and just that region has never known peace. And we've got to get to a point to where we can get there one way or another. And the way that the one world government, the United Nations, has been a complete and total failure. They continue to sit there and side with the dictators, and they're not sitting there actually trying to improve the living conditions of the people in Eastern Africa. They're more upset with us in what we're doing inside the United States.
Yeah.
And we kind of open ourselves up to that when we go in and try to facilitate regime change. I'm one of those people that I would much rather not have to do that. But if the Iranian people are going to stand up and start throwing haymakers against the IRGC, well, a strategically placed 250-pound small diameter bomb between the forehead of a certain person just might make that area calm down a little bit more.
You do that, for one, eliminating the Great Terror threat, and 2, without the U.S. getting involved in a war. And that's the whole goal here. If you can facilitate change without the U.S. having to lift hardly a finger and with no American lives getting harmed, and ultimately no one's lives getting harmed, then that is a great thing. It really, I don't know why it's so controversial for a president to stand up for innocent people getting slaughtered, whether it's Iranians or whether it's Christians in Nigeria, or whether, more importantly, it is the people in America who have been poisoned by drugs that have come through our southern border for the last few decades. It is no different. And President Trump is standing up for people, and he's standing up for life. And that brings us to our next break. You're listening to 103.9 WYAB. We will be right back. And we are back on 103.9 WYAB on the Andrew Gosser Show. Andrew, we're almost done here. How's it been?
I think you've done an admirable job, especially you ran the board a little bit by yourself, but I'll basically let you run the show today. You did all of Shad's interview. You did a great job with that. There haven't been any hiccups on the board. Transitions have been nice, and you're really learning the business and the behind the scenes business. It's very, very rare to have somebody who's a 17-year-old who is articulate as you are, who can go out there and do the things that you're doing. And it's just really awesome to have you in the studio behind the microphone running the board.
Well, thank you. And I mean, at 17 years old, I never thought that I would be blasting out my words through 50,000 watts at WYAB. So thank you for that opportunity. But I think it's been a great day, and I hope that we'll have more great days. I have to go back to school next week, so that's unfortunate. I'll go back Wednesday because Monday they have like a PTO day or something, and then Tuesday I'll be at the swearing in at the Capitol, watching Senator Don Hartness get sworn in at the state capitol. Finally have some real conservatives in office. If you don't remember, Chris McDaniel's seat was gerrymandered out, and but Don Hartness won his seat back. So Chris McDaniel's legacy will be remembered and hopefully honored by Senator Don Hartness down there in Hattiesburg area. And session's coming up. So we got a lot of big stuff coming up, Andrew. So hopefully, I know we'll have a little talk here after about some stuff we're going to try to get done. Mississippi, great things are coming. And if you continue to work hard, keep your eye on the ball, keep your eye on the prize, we can win.
Yes, we can. And, it's one of those things where, Rome wasn't built in a day. Rome didn't lose the war in the day. It takes time. And just like with Senator Hartness getting sworn in next Tuesday, that's a victory. The things that Shad White's trying to do in the auditor's office, the legislation that he's going to be pushing for, we hope that happens, especially through the House, and then hopefully push the Senate to make some moves there.
Yep.
And the things that we're going to be doing, and we're, like you said, we're about ready to go to a meeting, and big things are coming. And these are things that people have been waiting to get involved with, waiting to do, and we finally have it. And now we just have to execute it. And we're counting on all of you, the listeners, to help get involved and help us out as we go along and do this. Brother Blake, I don't know when the next time you'll be here, but when you've got a day off, let me know.
I will. Thank you so much, man. I can't thank you enough. But it has been great. And Andrew is absolutely right. Mississippi, we can win. We will win. And if we just put in the work and we keep our faith in God, we will win, and we will win big. The best is yet to come. Thank you, Mississippi. God bless.